So, remember, as we started this chapter, that chapter 2 and chapter 7 are the parallels, right? And both of these have dreams. And both of them deal with images, as we talked about last week. This image is so important. And this will really tie into the lesson today, almost as much as it would if we were in chapter 9. Chapter 9 would tie into our lesson, our sermon today even more. But who had a dream in chapter 2? Who had a dream in Daniel chapter 2? Maybe the most famous dream, Nebuchadnezzar. Thank you, Bob. Yeah, Nebuchadnezzar has a dream. The king has a dream. Now, we are going to have a similar dream in many ways in chapter 7, but it's not the king dreaming, it is Daniel dreaming. And so Daniel needs his dream interpreted. And we are going to look at some of the similarities of those as we go throughout. I'm going to put this up here as we go throughout this study. Do we have this online, or because I said we do? Great. So basically what we have here on your left is Nebuchadnezzar's dream. He dreamt of a statue, an image. The head was gold, the torso and body and arms were silver. The midsection was bronze, and the feet were, or the legs were iron, the feet iron mixed with clay. And we talked about what those different kingdoms refer to. On the right is very much what I believe in is those kingdoms. On the left is a popular view today that became popular in the last 120 years or so. But as I mentioned last week, when we look at this, to get caught up in the specifics of what nations or kingdoms these are is missing the point altogether, which is what I've done. And the reason I feel confident in saying it is missing the point is because Jesus strongly alludes to this very chapter. Did any of you know that? Recall that? It's easily missed. And so hopefully, Lord willing, we'll look at that and look at this from the perception or lens that Jesus looked at it through. So with that, let's begin in verse 1 of Daniel 7. In the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel saw a dream and visions of his head as he laid in his bed. Then he wrote down the dream and told the sum of the matter. So this is what Daniel wrote. Verse 2, Daniel declared, I saw in my vision by night, and behold, 4 winds of heaven were stirring up the great sea. And 4 great beasts came out of the sea, different from one another. The first was like a lion, and had eagle's wings. Then as I looked, its wings were plucked off, and it was lifted up from the ground and made to stand on 2 feet like a man. And the mind of a man was given to it. And behold, another beast, the second one, like a bear, it was raised up on one side. It had 3 ribs in its mouth between its teeth, and it was told, arise, devour much flesh. After this, I looked, and behold, are you ready to wake up yet? If you're Daniel? I think so. It's time to wake up. He doesn't wake up soon enough, though. Verse 6, after this, I looked, and behold, another like a leopard with 4 wings of a bird on its back. And the beast had 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. Lisa, do you know what we call that beast? That's the deaf leopard, that one. Verse 7, after this I saw in the night visions, and behold, a 4th beast. We're going to see this one is different. Terrifying and dreadful and exceedingly strong. It had great iron teeth. It devoured and broke in pieces and stamped what was left with its feet. It was different from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. I considered the horns, and behold, there came up among them another horn, a little one, before which 3 of the first horns were plucked up by the roots. And behold, in this horn were eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking great things. A couple of general observations in this section as Daniel has this dream. And all joking aside, this is a terrible dream. It's a terrifying dream. And Daniel's dreaming, the 4 winds stir the sea. Mike, you can picture that, right? When the winds are stirring, the sea becomes turbulent, and up out of the sea comes these beasts, one after another. And what's interesting, if you look closely, well, I guess first off, the sea has great significance. In the Hebrew mind and throughout all of Hebrew literature, the Old Testament, what did the sea refer to? Do you know? There were 2 real significant aspects of the land. One was the sea, and one was land. And when the Hebrew people were talking about the land, what were they always talking about? The what land? The Promised Land. Yeah, thank you, Shirley. The Promised Land. And so the land usually referred to the Hebrew nation, God's people. The sea, there's scary stuff out there. I mean, we've in some ways conquered it to some degree, right? But as you stand at the edge of the shore at the beach and you look out over the ocean, that's a terrifying concept. And even more so at that time than now. And it referred to the Gentiles and the forces that were present in the Gentile world. As you might imagine, again, as communication was less, everything outside of your little nation was even more terrifying than it is today, or at least as terrifying, because you can't see what's out there, but you know there's beasts that exist out there. But notice this about Daniel's vision. It's not a lion that comes out of the sea. Did you catch that? Verse 4, the first, someone help me. Thank you. Was like a lion. The first was like a lion. So, I had those images up there just a few moments ago, and sometimes we see these lions come out. Understand that what Daniel is saying is these beasts had characteristics like a lion. He's not saying a lion came up out of the sea, and the significance of that is he's talking about characteristics, right? These represent, as we're going to see, an angel tells them, 4 different kingdoms. And so he's not saying this is, a lion roller. He's saying these kingdoms had characteristics like this. And they're great and terrifying things. Now, here I think is the premise of this chapter and the entire book. And sometimes we think we are very, very unique, and that all the world is falling apart. And oftentimes you hear today, man, things are getting bad. Do you see what's happening in Ukraine? If you're in Ukraine, it is bad. Right? But you don't have to be in Ukraine. The world around, things are falling apart. But let me pause for a second and give you a little bit of imagery, and I hope this is helpful. But Amanda and I have oftentimes talked that it's only with a blind eye the history that we can even begin to fathom, especially in our country, in our part of the world, North America, that we could even fathom, say, this is as bad as it ever was. How long did Dark Ages last? Do you think that the kings of the Dark Ages, that what I'm saying is the people who had very best in the Dark Ages would like your position in history? You betcha. You betcha. Right? Things have been bad. In fact, society deteriorated and rotted away, and it was chaotic. That's why we call it the Dark Ages. Society, culture went back thousands of years, at least 1,000 years during that period of time. Learning was lost. What horrible times, but all the same, we don't have to go back to the Dark Ages to see beasts tearing the world up, do we? It's all around us. The world is, as Paul said, as a woman in the pains of childbirth. It's tough, right? Now, we as Christians are so foolish if we do our jobs really, really well. We're so foolish, and by the way, that's a term that Paul ascribed to the faith of Christians as it was seen by others. So foolish is to be different than the whole world. To look around and to see everything going on out of control and to say, God's got this. God's got this. It's all right. It's all right. God's got this. I hope we're that foolish. Because imagine Daniel ripped from his home, probably castrated, as we looked at the beginning of chapter 1. Thrown in this place where he's in constant trouble, constant peril. His buddies got thrown into the fiery furnace. He's got thrown into the lion's den. These people are suppressed. They don't even hardly believe in the true God. His own people. Suppressed by the Babylonians. In a few years, they're going to start rebuilding the temple. What is it? 50,000 people? That's it. Out of the whole nation, 50,000 people choose to go back to Jerusalem. Why? Well, one, the task was hard. Two, this is home now. You can only take that perception if you've accepted the worldview of the world, right? Here's what's so important. Here's what Daniel is getting at. These beasts are coming up out of the sea. They're tearing things apart. They're trampling underfoot my friends, my loved ones. The world is horrible. But, if you would, read with me in verse 9. So Daniel's watching. He sees all this come out of the sea. And as I looked, verse 9 starts. As I looked, thrones were placed, and the Ancient of Days took his seat. His clothing was white as snow, and the hair of his head like pure wool. His throne was fiery flames, its wheels were burning fire. A stream of fire issued and came out from before him. 1,000 thousands served him, and 10,000 10,000s stood before him. The court sat in judgment, and the books were opened. There's someone in control, and he's about to bring all this chaos to trial. Right? What's the outcome of the trial? Verse 11. I looked then because of the sound of great words that the horn was speaking. That's the horn that was on the last beast, the small horn that came out was saying mighty things. You may be getting imagery of Revelation. And as I looked, the beast was killed and the body destroyed and given over, burned with fire. And for the rest of the beast, their dominion was taken away. But their lives were prolonged for a season and a time. Now, great pain and effort can be put into deciphering the details of these things. And especially we end that their lives were prolonged for how long? Did you catch that? A season and a time. Now, how long is that? Exactly, right? Now, and we can get all excited about those details, but understand that Daniel and God, through Daniel, is painting an image. Do we know the details, and could we argue about the details? Sure. What can we see, and can we undeniably experience? The world is in chaos. Daniel says, as I look at all this, here's the Ancient of Days. What a term, huh? Ancient of Days. And he places himself in the throne. There's thrones around him. And judgment begins. And fire shoots out. And all these people are serving him. And the books are open. He's going to lay judgment down. Questions or comments before we go on? Again, we're going to come back, but look again at broad perception, not so much every detail. Continue in verse 13. I saw in the night visions, and behold, the clouds of heaven, there came one like, what is it? Son of Man. Who comes to mind immediately? Jesus. Why does Jesus come to mind?
Came on the clouds of heaven, and he's the Son of Man.
Son of God? But Son of God doesn't bring to mind
Son
of Man, huh? Why does this make us think of Jesus?
Because he is the Son of Man.
He is the Son of Man.
Because
By
Father is our Father, Father of Man, so he's the Son of Man.
okay?
And I agree with what he said. It says from the clouds of heaven.
That's cryptic, though, isn't it? That's not really how Jesus arrived on earth. And by the way, I don't disagree with Mike. But
Oh, that's what you're saying. That's what I think of. Coming out of the clouds.
yeah.
Of the Lord.
Yeah.
Is that like him coming back? Maybe?
Who called Jesus Son of Man? Now, Kevin said Son of God. That's a term given to Jesus. It's also a term he never used of himself. It's not that it's wrong. It is accurate. Inspired writers wrote. Jesus used this term, Son of Man. Now, is it referring to Jesus? Yes, largely. Is that what Daniel saw, though? Does Daniel know Jesus? No. And isn't it interesting that sometimes, not sometimes, very oftentimes, we get so caught up in our perspective that we miss what's before us. One like the Son of Man. What's that even?
Similar to.
Similar to. And really, we don't even know what the Son of Man is at this point. Now, we are going back because we've been giving other information. But this was an interesting point that I found on this. And Dr. Mackey brings this out. Is this portion, you can see it real small up there. It's for those of you that are online, they're still seeing that. This portion of Daniel, was it written in Hebrew or Aramaic? You got still Aramaic. That's going to change next chapter, but this is the Aramaic section, chapters 2 through 7. It's in the center of that I'm sure you can't read, but You can maybe vision if you're familiar with that poster. So, what was the Hebrew name for man? Sometimes the way we read Genesis is lacking because we don't know this little tidbit. Adam. Adam. How do we say that? Adam. We take as a proper name, don't we? Adam is the Hebrew word for man, mankind. But wait, this isn't Hebrew. It's a little tidbit that's a bit of a twist. This is Aramaic. Does anyone know the Aramaic word for... Of course you don't. Why would you, right? How could you? I didn't know it until about 4 weeks ago. You ready for this? Adam. They're cousin languages. So the point of all that is the son of Adam. Now, we get tied up immediately and assign Jesus to this. And that's worth doing, but also seeing a little bit more richness is helpful. Remember the beast of the beginning part of this chapter? They were like beast, but what were they also like, every one of them? Man. Right? Man. They stood like a man, they thought like a man, they spoke like a man, had eyes like a man. All these are descriptions that were given to that beast. What Daniel has pointed out to this point is that when we do things our way, we become like beasts. What Daniel, I believe, sees is coming from heaven the son of Adam. The man as he was meant to be. He's going to rule differently than these beasts. He's going to be that contrast from that beast. Now, was that ultimately Jesus? Absolutely. I hope that the tie-in is obvious there. But we're going to come back and see what Jesus says about this. I think really supports the idea that I'm putting forward. It's got this bigger meaning as well. Questions or comments on the Son of Man there?
Kind of another question. In the English Standard Version, some of these scriptures are written, instead of like a solid paragraph, it's written as if it's been quoted from something else.
Yeah.
So and it doesn't tell me in my notes if it's being quoted and where it's being quoted from.
Okay, great observation, and I'm glad you brought that back up because it's something I've mentioned throughout Daniel that's really important, that deserves to be mentioned again, especially this passage. It's written like that, not because it's quoted, but because it's poetry. If you flip back through Daniel, you see several places like that this poetry exists. When you see that, it's important to recognize that what's being conveyed is more than just the literal words. Because they're quoted, it's not that necessarily that Darius said this exact words. It's the message he conveyed. It's poetic to bring about a point. And if we look at as we read the latter part of this message of this poem, we're going to see this poem is just like the other poems. And so let's go ahead and do that, and then I'll ask if that answered your question. I saw, verse 13, in the night visions, and behold, with the clouds of heaven, there came one like a son of man, and he came to the Ancient of Days, and was presented before him. Now, verse 14 is what reads exactly like all these other poems in Daniel. And to him was given dominion and glory and a kingdom, that all peoples, nations, and languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion which shall not pass away, and his kingdom one that shall not be destroyed. So what takes place in this part of the vision, so we have all this chaos taking place, and then up in the sky we have these thrones set up. The Ancient of Days ends up sitting on one, and he calls the earth to trial. As the trial goes on, one appearing like the Son of Man, coming in clouds, goes before and is presented. You're seeing all kind of New Testament tie-ins, I hope. Presented to the Ancient of Days. Remember Revelation? No one's worthy to open these seals. But the Lamb was found to be worthy. Right? And so he's presented to the Ancient of Days, and what is given to him? What's given to him? A kingdom. A kingdom is given to him. There's the contrast. He's going to reign differently, completely differently. He's going to be what man was meant to be. In fact, Hebrews chapter 1, verse 4 or 5 verses there talk about what Jesus was. He was the exact image of God, right? We are created in the what of God? Image. Jesus is what we're meant to be. Jesus rules the way we were meant to rule. Stark contrast to these beasts. Corey, did that answer your poetry question, your quotation question? Okay, good. Now we're starting to get this clear picture. We're not going to get into the interpretation today because we have to go to the New Testament. But this picture, what we're saying is all this chaos. Why can Daniel be calm? Why can Daniel face the lion? Why can his buddies face the furnace? Why do they know it's okay? Because they know there's a bigger picture. That bigger picture is God's still in control. And that kingdom was coming. It was going to be reigned over by the proper king. We'd know him as the King of Kings, Lord of Lords, right? Questions or comments?
You read that this kingdom, it's not just a little country somewhere, it's the whole world. It's the whole world because it says all nations and all the people.
Yeah. Yes.
Different languages, so that's the whole world.
Great point. And remember, in chapter 2, that meteorite flies out of heaven, right? Again, these are parallel images. Chapter 2, that meteorite flies out of heaven, hits the feet of that image, blows it apart, and then grows into a mountain, compassing the land, right? What's the church done? Since these four kingdoms, and since the kingdoms we're studying about, where are they? What are they today? It's a good answer. They're nothing. All the kingdoms since, there have been great conquerors. Nothing. The world stands long enough, the nations that stand today will be nothing. God's kingdom stands forever, right? It's beyond physical borders, as Mike's pointing out, beyond language, cultural barriers. It is worldwide. Different kind of kingdom. In many regards, it's only in the position of Daniel standing at this in captivity as you turn your Bibles, Matthew 26, that observation could be made, right? Because how's the kingdom going to involve the entire earth? It's not like these beasts that trample everyone and kill and destroy, right? It's got to be someone in captivity that makes this, that sees this vision, that understands this concept. All right. If you didn't already turn to Matthew 26, allow me to read one verse, whether you're there or not. I'm going to read one verse from Daniel again. This is Daniel 7, verse 13. I saw in the night visions, and behold, the clouds of heaven, there came one like Son of Man that came to the Ancient of Days. Now, Matthew 26, what is going on? What's going on? Not quite. Not quite that far. You're getting close. He's on the other side of that.
The betrayal.
The betrayal in the beginning. And then, right after betrayal, he's taken to what?
Before Pilate.
Yes, he does go before Pilate. Yes. And right before Pilate, where was he? Garden of Gethsemane. And then that's where he's betrayed. And before he goes to Pilate, where does he go? We're getting it narrowed down. Who took him into captivity? It wasn't the Romans. The Jews. He's taken before the high priest. Right? Now, for the most part on trial, they're making all these false accusations against him, right? And he keeps quiet. But when he finally does speak up, they ask him all these questions. Are you the Messiah? You said it. I mean, what? And finally, he speaks up. And he makes this curious statement. I probably should have brought this to your minds before we just read that quote. He makes this curious statement, and the priests, they lose their minds. They lose their minds. Did you ever wonder why? For me, even being a student of the Bible for the majority of my life, I'm like, how is that? I'm missing something, right? How is what Jesus says? I tell you that from henceforth you shall see the Son of Man coming in the clouds and sitting on the right hand. What? They lose their minds over that? I think we're starting to understand why, aren't we? Matthew 26. I'm going to come back. We love to read a lot of this. I'm going to come to verse 62, though. And the high priest stood up and said, have you no answer to make? What is it that these men testify against you? But Jesus remained silent, and the high priest said to him, I adjure you by the living God, tell us if you are the Christ, the Son. Notice what takes place. The high priest says, by the power of God, tell us. He's no longer relying on his own authority, right? He's appealing to the authority of God. Why is he doing that? He is the high priest. He is the representative of God to the people. He says, so God commands you. Tell me. Notice what Jesus said. Here's that statement, verse 64, that I mentioned. You have said so. Are you the Son? You've said so. And then look, but I tell you, from now on you will see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of power and coming on the clouds of heaven. Now, again, brothers and sisters, I believe I don't know about you, I've made this terrible mistake in my life. Because when I read that, I assign meanings in my head that I've assigned from elsewhere. And I believe Jesus is talking about second coming. Right? That's what the imagery comes to mind. Jesus is referring to Daniel 7. Now understand this very quickly, because we're out of time, but this is what it's all about. What's Jesus say? He's not just saying that this is about him. He just made an accusation against the high priest. What is that accusation against the high priest and the entire Jewish nation? They are the beast. They are the beast. In short, this is important. I do believe those symbols have specific meanings, but they also have this general trend, this general idea. They were supposed to represent God. And he says, the moment you condemn me, you are found guilty. The world is found guilty. You are on trial. The world is on trial. I'm the one presented to God, and I will reign. That is why they lose their mind. They understood what Jesus was saying. Questions or comments? In the interpretation next week, I hope to draw home in this message. We are to be the contrast to those beasts. We are to be part of that kingdom that Jesus reigns over. Thank you so much for your time.